A suspect wanted for killing a student near a high school. And our reporters remain on the ground in
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for?
Секрет. Мені здається,
Нельзя жить, имея целью агрессию по отношению к другому человеку или к другой стране.
2017. One of the main recommendations of the conference was to, even though we had one also in 2019 as well, both have
Billowing clouds of tear gas fill the streets in almost every district of the capital.
Especially
Это военная часть на Берестейке. Уже минут 10.
Сумку, Коля! Поднял сумку возле тачки? Куда подпиши? Возле тачки поднял сумку, нет? Нет! А где она?
Вижу, горит что-то. Да. Знаешь? Да.
Перебуває диверсійно-розвідувальна група ворога. Людей закликають повідомляти про пересування окупанта. 25 лютого на оболонь увійшли російські десертанти. Так, місцевих жителів закликають не лише повідомляти про локації цих людей, а ще й бути максимально обережними. Так, ну, все, що можу сказати вам зараз.
Володимир Грицько. Це
Перебуває диверсійно-розвідувальна
про повітряні загрози і повідомляти прагнемо вам лише точної перевіреної інформації про стан справ і на передовій, і у тилу. У студії наступні кілька годин працюватимуть Соломія Вітвицька і я, Олександр Моторний. І почнемо із найголовнішого за минулу ніч. Наші військові збили 4 ворожих повітряних борти. Щонайменше 2 штурмовики Су-20 Іл-76 напакований московицьким десантом. Це сталося в районі Василькова.
Ця ніч буде більш тяжкою, ніж день. Під ударом багато міст нашої держави. Чернігів, Суми, Харків, наші хлопці, наші дівчата на Донбасі, міста півдня України, особлива увага Києву. Не можна втратити столицю. Звертаюсь до наших захисників і захисниць на усіх фронтах цієї ночі. Ворог застосує усі наявні у них сили, щоб зламати наш опір. Підло, жорстко і не по-людськи. Цієї ночі вони підуть на штурм. Всі ми маємо розуміти, що нас чекає. Цієї ночі маємо вистояти.
Отходьте. Не снимай.
Ася, не знімай!
Пойду не отхуярить, да. Аня, камеру убери на.
Нет!
দ্রুত রায় কার্যকর ও দিবসটি জাতীয় সেনা দিবস হিসেবে ঘোষণার দাবি স্বজনদের। নিত্যপণ্যের দাম কমার কোনো লক্ষণ নেই, বরং বেড়েই চলেছে। সপ্তাহের ব্যবধানে আরও বেড়েছে মোটা ও মাঝারি।
And Russia. So it is now dawn in Kiev on what is now the third day of a full-scale Russian invasion. Overnight explosions and air raid sirens were heard across Ukraine's capital. Hours and called on the public to defend it. Let's get the latest. Andrew Simmons is live for us in the capital. So, Andrew, as I say, the president said that he believed Russian forces would try and take the capital overnight. What's been happening?
They haven't taken the capital. Let's get straight to that point first of all. But they are so near the centre of a city now. We're talking no more than probably 6-7 kilometres. It was an extraordinarily awful night. Missiles just raining down on Kiev and ballistic missiles shuddering the city and relentless bombardments by the Air Force of the Russian Federation. There has been so many stories of bravery, so many stories of tragedy, advances from the north by Russian armor, from the west, which has been one of the weaker points of the Russian advance, from the east and the south. We are getting reports of at least one Ilyushin 76 transport carrier. That's a very large aeroplane. Russian paratroopers on board. One of those crashed, having been shot down. There are reports also of a second paratroop carrier being shot down. The exact whereabouts I don't have here. The list of incidents, the list of contacts between the Ukrainian army and the Russian forces is endless all over the country. But here in the capital, the force of the conflict has reached a seismic level. The civilians, you wouldn't have seen anybody at surface level during the night. Everyone had taken some form of shelter, most of it below ground, some of it in the handiest sort of shelter people could get. I would say no.
Hey, shoot that tank right there. You see it to the left, right there?
Right, down right. Yeah, that's a tank. That's a tank.
Please fire.
So when are we going to different ship? We're going to different ship?
At this time,
Was there a time frame?
the blocks will be appearing.
Yeah, what? Because the triangles, I mean the square wasn't small enough?
Yeah, I think it has to be lined up perfectly. So like, it can't be like this and it can't be over like this. It has to be like right there.
Really? Can I shoot it again?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Try it again? Who's that song? Who's that song? Right, sorry.
My words now got American. Born and raised, baby. Born and raised. Tell them, Garcia.
You're right. Bill Thermo. Thanks a lot. Roger, at this time, you failed to engage a target.
Thermal marked out.
Where's that thermal button at? There we go.
Hey, bring it. Pan down a little bit. You're focusing on the forward ground. See how it focused where you're pointing?
Yeah.
Hey, shoot that tank right there.
You see it to the left, right there?
Right, down right. Yeah, that's a tank. That's a tank.
To trying to repel an overwhelming force. And I think in any conflict, it's the motivation that is key, and there is no doubt about it. There are people of so many different backgrounds and ages in this force now. President Zelensky ordered all of his senior officers to call out for getting people in, to get them signed up and on the streets, armed with some knowledge at least of trying to take on the enemy. And what we've seen is stories of heroism, it would seem, and I'm sure there are on the other side as well. But that motivation, the motivation of people fighting for a cause which is independence, freedom, the choice between what is, in some ways, a flawed democracy or the authoritarianism of Putin's Russia, well, they are fighting for the former, not the latter, obviously. And that resolve you referred to, there are many examples of it. There is one example the Ukrainian president gave in his address, which was quite extraordinary, really, because he had his leaders behind him. He was almost wearing a sort of nervous smile when he proclaimed that they will fight on, that they will push forward. And anyway, this story of bravery he spoke of was a young soldier with explosives laid on a bridge, an advancing convoy. There was some problem with the detonation. He gave his own life. He, according to the president, ran onto the bridge and detonated the explosion. The bridge was badly damaged. That's the story he told and then he then proclaimed that it was going to be an incredibly difficult night, and many people had thought, the president himself included, that the dawn would have actually come with this city having fallen. It hasn't fallen, but it is incredibly close to it.
All right, Andrew, we'll talk to you as the coming hours go on. Thanks very much indeed for that update in the meantime. Well, Sviatoslav Yurash is the youngest member of Ukraine's parliament, and he says the residents of Kiev will defend their city from Russian forces.
The reality is that the sirens are going off every other minute, and you can hear the shooting happening and military presence everywhere. I myself have spent most of the day trying to help organize, trying to help mobilize, trying to help provide the weapons to all those who are willing to take them up to defend our capital. And I can say that pretty much everyone I met in the capital who has stayed here has expressed willingness to try and get those weapons and help out. And we see that very clearly. Today there was incursion in the north of Kiev, where basically the attack was not just repulsed but crushed, exactly because of the citizens taking weapons that were distributed basically by trucks arriving with all the guns that you can imagine, so that people can try and take them up and push on the Russian invaders in every way they can. For my country, this is a moment of a greatest test in its existence, and we need to handle that test and pass it to continue on building our state's future. And my grandfathers, great-grandfathers were fighting for this chance and were dying for this chance, be that in the Second World War, in times of the Kremlin's Soviet experiments. And now it is our time to have the same test, and we're going to win.
Well, Russia has vetoed a UN Security Council draft resolution condemning its invasion of Ukraine. It would have confirmed the sovereignty of Ukraine and demanded that Russia immediately withdraw its forces. Shihab Ratanzi has this report.
As president of the Security Council, it fell to Russia to list the UN member states who co-sponsored a resolution opposing its use of force against Ukraine and calling for an unconditional withdrawal.
Botswana, Венгрии, Guatemala.
The resolution did gain the support of 11 members of the Council, with China, India and the United Arab Emirates abstaining. As expected, Russia used its veto power.
Russia, you can veto this resolution, but you cannot veto our voices. You cannot veto the truth. You cannot veto our principles. You cannot veto the Ukrainian people.
The Russian ambassador countered that the resolution was imbalanced for not mentioning the shelling of Donbass by the Ukrainian government, nor the failure by Kiev and the West to implement the 2015 peace deal. And he added this.
Нам, конечно, трудно тягаться с Соединенными Штатами.
I will refrain from listing out the aggressions carried out by the United States in their history, but you are in no position to moralize.
The US succeeded in avoiding a Chinese veto with its final version of the resolution, but Beijing once again agreed with Russia that the crisis had developed over time as a result of NATO's disregard for Russia's security, and cautioned the Security Council.
Any action should be truly conducive to diffusing the crisis, rather than adding fuel to the fire.
The Ukrainian ambassador accused his Russian counterpart of having no idea what was in Vladimir Putin's mind, but he did reaffirm Ukraine's commitment to negotiations, even as he despaired for the safety of his people.
And I will ask all of you to pray or to meditate if you do not believe in God for peace.
It's expected that a similar but non-binding resolution will be introduced at a special session of the United Nations General Assembly, where Russia does not have the veto. And already it appears to have the support of more than 80 of the UN's 193 member states. Shia Britansi, Al Jazeera, the United Nations.
Well, the United States is among a growing number of countries planning financial sanctions, including asset freezes on Russia's leadership. The coordinated restrictions aim to force Russia to the negotiating table. Alan Fisher has this report.
It's another step to put pressure on the Russian leader.
In alignment with the decision by our European allies, the United States will join them in sanctioning President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov and members of the Russian National Security Team.
24 hours after President Biden said he still had further options with sanctions, Vladimir Putin became one of only a handful of world leaders to be personally sanctioned by the US.
This step sends a clear message about the strength of the opposition to the actions by President Putin and the direction in his leadership of the Russian military.
The US president talked with President Zelensky for 40 minutes on Friday. He promised to continue humanitarian, military and security support. But what isn't clear from the White House reading of the call is if they discussed Moscow's offer of peace talks, an offer dismissed by the US State Department.
Now we see Moscow suggesting that diplomacy take place at the barrel of a gun, or as Moscow's rockets, mortars, artillery target the Ukrainian people. This is not real diplomacy. Those are not the conditions for real diplomacy.
Oksana Markarova, the Ukrainian ambassador in Washington, says they are gathering evidence of possible war crimes.
Ukraine has been victim of unprovoked aggression by Russian Federation. The second day was even harder. The attacks have been more brutal, but I'm very pleased to say that they were not successful, definitely not successful as the enemy planned them.
The decision to sanction Vladimir Putin is a significant escalation, but the White House says it still has more tools in its toolbox and will judge what's needed day by day. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the White House.
Well, NATO is sending thousands of troops by land, air and sea to protect allies near Russia and Ukraine. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has called the crisis a new normal in European security. NATO's pledge comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky criticised the alliance for not coming to his country's aid. Diplomatic editor James Bays reports now from Brussels.
Troops, tanks and weapons are on the move across Europe as NATO continues to reinforce its eastern front, its member states who are closest to Russia. Now the alliance has activated elements of its response force. Thousands of extra troops, over 100 jets are on high alert, 120 warships are in position. NATO leaders met by secure video conference for the first time since the start of the Russian invasion, as fears grow that the Ukrainian capital could be taken soon.
How fearful are you about the possible fall of Kyiv? And if we move to a resistance, insurgency type situation, what support can NATO then give?
What we have seen is that the Ukrainian forces are fighting bravely and are actually able to inflict damage on the invading Russian forces. But again, it is a very fluid and an evolving situation. NATO allies expressed at the summit today that they provide support to Ukraine. They are ready to continue to provide support to Ukraine.
Here at NATO headquarters, the plan is to fully protect their members on the Eastern Front, the countries closest to Russia. But at the same time, they're sending a message to President Putin. You're getting exactly what you said you didn't want, an increased NATO presence on your doorstep. It's part of a coordinated effort. The European Union was invited to the virtual NATO meeting. At the same time, EU foreign ministers met in Brussels to agree a fresh round of sanctions, the third in just 3 days.
King's College London has been looking at the Russian advance.
We know that Russian troops have been stretching the Ukrainian defences with a multi-pronged attack. The British Ministry of Defence Information in the MOD have produced some estimates of where they think the forces are, and they confirm more or less what we've been saying, that forces in Crimea have moved north and eastwards, that forces from Belarus have moved towards Kiev and are in the north of Kiev, but forces up in the northwest have not done as well and seem to have been held, particularly at a place like Chernihiv. It doesn't appear that they've got through that very easily, and so some of these forces are more slow arriving in Kiev than they expected to be. Let's just have a look at what's happening in the Donbass. The Donbass region is where all this started, what, in a sense, this was supposed to be all about. And as expected, Russian forces have moved out of Crimea and were expected to move from the Donbass region itself to actually link up. It doesn't look as if they've made it because Ukrainian forces seem